assault and battery, arson, cruel and unusual punishment, excessive use of force. AccioAttorney. I'm an attorney, but for legal reasons, I need to say that the information provided in this video does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. At long last, and after 5 months of racking up many billable hours, I'm ready to walk through the Hogwarts Legacy trailer with you. You will see students break some rules and commit some crimes. If you or a loved one has been the victim of any of the following, you may be entitled to compensation. First, at 47 seconds, we see a centaur confront 2 humans. I can only assume he's confronting them about trespassing on his land, and trespassing is a crime. I will have another video discussing Scottish common law property rights in the 1890s. However, as we learn in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, first published in 1927, 37 years after this footage takes place, centaurs have not been granted being status, but are instead classified as beasts, which means they have no legal property rights. As such, I'm confident in my ability to defend the humans confronted in this clip from any trespassing claim. We now move to a clip of a troll breaking through a building. This is your classic property crime you read about in law school. Clearly, you see property destruction from the defendant. Now, the defendant could argue he was the owner of the establishment and was just renovating his property. However, usually when you engage in that level of destruction, you oftentimes need a permit of some sort, and I do not see any ministry officials in the background overseeing this demolition. Additionally, it looks like from the clip that the defendant then looks at the potential plaintiffs in the foreground and screams menacingly. I would like to see more before opining on this potential case, and again, this does not constitute legal advice, but if you are one of these 2 individuals in the clip, you could be plaintiffs for an assault case. At 1 minute and 26 seconds, we see a goblin named Ranrock accompanied by 2 individuals, one of whom is dressed in an official uniform. I would like to know more, but you could have a potential corruption situation with either extortion or bribery. At 2 minutes and 53 seconds, we see a duel. Clearly, the gentleman in the foreground attacks the gentleman in the background. However, this occurs in a sanctioned duel, so contact between each other is complicitly consented to, and as such, the potential defendant in front can successfully defend himself by saying the potential plaintiff consented to the contact. At 3 minutes and 43 seconds, we witness a bit of slavery. Now, Britain outlawed slavery in 1833, and as we know, this clip is from 1890, so we just cannot overlook the situation. However, slavery of humans was what was outlawed in 1833, not slavery of house elves. House elves are not humans and even operate under different laws of magic, which I will address in a later video. So technically, with morality aside, Hogwarts is going to get a pass both from me and in the eye of the law. I'm sorry to say that for those of you who feel uncomfortable with this fact, 100 years later, Hermione Granger is still fighting for elf rights and establishes SPEW in Goblet of Fire. Curiously, we are now brought to the prefect's bathroom on the 5th floor. The only time we hear of this location is in Goblet of Fire when Harry enters the bathroom by using the password Pine Fresh. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I do assume it's against the rules to enter the prefect's bathroom when you are not a prefect. So even though Harry was able to enter the room with a password, if he got caught, I'm certain he would have lost some house points. Now, you might counter by saying that this individual could be a prefect. He is in his 5th year after all, but this is also his 1st year at Hogwarts. And, as we learn in Order of the Phoenix, prefects are determined in the summer before they get to Hogwarts. They need to patrol the Hogwarts Express after all. Because the main character does not get sorted into his house until he arrives at school, it is ridiculous to think that he could have been assigned to the prefect role and then displace another student who is already given that role before he even gets to Hogwarts. At 4 minutes, we see an individual communing with the dead, necromancy is definitely frowned upon, and in my research, it usually falls under the umbrella of witchcraft, which ironically was criminalized by Parliament in 1542 and punishable by death. That law was repealed in 1736, but the Vagrancy Act, passed by Parliament in 1824, punishes fortune-telling, astrology, and spiritualism. So, while necromancy is not technically a crime, this entire Hogwarts operation, and at the very least divination class, is in violation of the law. Next, we hear the narrator describe Professor Binns as talented. Surely that's false advertising, because 100 years later, we hear the students complain about how boring he is. We know that ghosts don't get smarter or grow up with the years. Moaning Myrtle, after all, is still a child 50 years later. So it's not as if Professor Binns got any smarter or more talented in the last 100 years. This claim seems to be nothing more than propaganda from Hogwarts' teachers union, and as such, I would feel confident in filing a false advertising claim against the school. Moving forward to 4 minutes and 29 seconds, the individual uses the spell Lumos in an underground location, which we learn is an area surrounding Hogwarts. First, students are not allowed to use magic outside of school. Second, students are not allowed to leave the grounds unless they are going to Hogsmeade and have a signed permission slip. Third, it looks like nighttime and students are not allowed to leave their dormitories after dark, let alone the castle. This individual is clearly in violation of at least 3 school rules. At 5 minutes, we see a teacher attack a goblin unprovoked. There's just no reason for this level of aggression. Now, the goblin does fire a retaliatory blast, but this clearly constitutes self-defense in order to protect himself. If I were the goblin's attorney, I would file a claim against the teacher for assault and battery. In the next clip, we see 2 students in Ranrock's cave. Again, leaving the school will dock you some house points. And there's also a potential trespassing claim that Ranrock might have against the 2 students. However, if he invited them into the cave explicitly through verbal or written notice, or he implicitly invited them by opening his cave up for business to provide goods and services, the students could have a defense. But based on the context, it seems to be trespassing. Now, at 5 minutes and 13 seconds, we start to get into clips that show high levels of aggression. If you pause the video and slow it down to 0.25 speed, you will see a goblin getting summoned off screen on the left. Next, the individual fires a blast toward a second goblin, completely unprovoked. Though he physically does not touch the goblin, this is a standard case of battery because the spell touches him. That constitutes contact in the eyes of the law. The goblin then charges the individual, but the goblin has every right to defend himself. At 5 minutes and 20 seconds, you see 2 students attacking goblins. If this attack was planned, we start to get into the conspiracy territory, and the attacks the students use emit flames out of their wands, so we could also be looking at a level of arson. At 5 minutes and 30 seconds, we hear there's an alliance between the goblins and dark wizards. Ranrock and this dark wizard discuss getting the child. Now, getting the child seems to me to be conspiracy to commit a kidnapping or perhaps even child trafficking. The goblin then admits that he gave a distraction. No, this is a bad idea. You should not be admitting to anything without receiving some sort of plea deal, or at the very least having your attorney present. Without knowing what he's alluding to, if the distraction involved any sort of destruction, he could also be on the hook for property damage. At 5 minutes and 58 seconds, a student is seen off campus, but he is accompanied by a teacher. Similar to how Harry is allowed to leave campus in Half-Blood Prince with Professor Dumbledore, it seems that the school sanctions off-campus trips with teachers and students. Assault and battery, 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 assault and battery and destruction of property, assault and battery and arson, assault and battery and arson. At 7 minutes and 8 seconds, we see an individual attack two moving statues. While the statues are not living and tort law would not apply, it is still destruction of property. Assault and battery, destruction of property, assault and battery, arson, cruel and unusual punishment, excessive use of force, assault and battery, arson, assault and battery. At 8 minutes and 2 seconds, we see two students dueling, but the teacher implies that this is happening during a class because it is not on their own time. When I was a student and acted out in class, I got in trouble. Suffice it to say, unsanctioned dueling during class is in violation of school rules. At 8 minutes and 23 seconds, we see a student sneaking around after dark. This is going to result in some lost points for his house. Additionally, he attacks 3 individuals and possibly even robs the third if loot implies he took possessions from the individual. Because he's carrying a wand, this would also be an armed robbery. The narrator then encourages looting as we see a clip of a student opening a chest and taking out items that do not belong to him. That is theft. Assault and battery, assault and battery. The narrator here says deadly mandrake seedlings. This would lead me to believe this could be attempted murder. At 9 minutes and 46 seconds, I initially thought this constituted rule breaking, but we hear a teacher's voice, and as we know, the school sanctions off-campus interactions between teachers and students. So even though the castle grounds are normally the location for flying lessons, this does not constitute rule breaking. At 9 minutes and 58 seconds, we see a student attempt to cheat. That is both morally wrong and it's against school rules. And we know this to be against school rules because when students take their OWLs, they need to use anti-cheating quills, which prevents, obviously, cheating. Assault and battery. At 10 minutes and 21 seconds, we see 2 students sneaking around after dark, which is prohibited. At 10 minutes and 37 seconds, the librarian catches a student in the restricted section. As learned in Chamber of Secrets, students cannot go into the restricted section unless they have a signed permission slip from a teacher. Moreover, because this student is getting caught again, as the librarian says, a second offense might be an aggravating factor for his level of punishment. At 10 minutes and 42 seconds, a teacher takes a shrivel fig out of a student's hand, and that student says, "Hey." He clearly does not want this taken out of his hand. According to a Texas Supreme Court case in 1967 in the United States, Fisher versus Carousel Motor Hotel, taking something out of someone's hand constitutes battery. I'm sure that 1890s Scotland common law is similar. Moreover, the teacher then destroys the shrivel fig, destruction of property. When we are shown the room of requirement, we hear an older woman's voice introduce the room to us. If this voice is from a teacher, then she's allowing the student to use the room. However, when I was in school, if I wanted to use a room, I needed permission to use that room, and it was usually for a certain amount of time, such as 30 or 60 minutes. This clip implies the individual is taking up residence in the room. So, although he may have originally been granted permission to use it, he cannot stay there indefinitely. Slavery. At 12 minutes and 12 seconds, the student is in Hogsmeade at night. Usually, Hogsmeade trips are rigidly structured, and as we learned in Prisoner of Azkaban, Hogsmeade trips are few and far between during the school year. So if we are going out at night, it seems like it would be violating school rules. However, this takes place in 1890. Perhaps things have changed in the last 100 years. As we know, after all, both Grindelwald and Voldemort rose to power during those 100 years, and there could have been an increase in safety measures by the school to restrict how often students were away from the school. Possibly, 1890s could have been a little more lax. Now, this might not be breaking a school rule, but it is certainly a fashion crime to wear clashing colors and patterns like this. Assault and battery. At 13:03, We see a student off campus and not in Hogsmeade, which is not allowed. These vendors are also outside of the grounds, so that's going to result in some lost points. If the individual in the clip at 1326 attacks this creature without provocation, that could be animal cruelty. And kidnapping mooncalves constitutes wildlife trafficking. It is very concerning that the narrator praises this behavior. Assault and battery. Murder is just not okay. As we learned in Goblet of Fire, there are 3 unforgivable curses which result in life sentences in Azkaban if used against other humans. These curses are the Killing Curse, the Cruciatus Curse, and the Imperious Curse. And murder is certainly the worst. This individual's family is certainly going to want to press criminal charges. Now, the defendant could claim that he killed a non-human, which might not result in a life sentence. I don't know what creature was killed or what his being status is from the Ministry of Magic, but at the very least, the defendant has opened himself up to a potential wrongful death case from the victim's family. At 14 minutes, the student is walking outside the castle grounds. While not technically breaking a school rule, going to a dodgy place such as the Hog's Head shows a severe lack in judgment. Flying a hippogriff off school grounds is a violation of school rules as well. Destruction of property. As you see, there were plenty of instances of rule breaking and even more concerning law breaking. If you or a loved one have been the victim of any of these crimes, I would highly suggest you reach out to an attorney. Again, I must stress that this commentary was not intended to provide legal advice. It was merely to make you aware of the possible opportunities you might have to seek compensation. Thank you for following along. Please like and subscribe for more content, and until next time, only use those wands for self-defense.